Hey Garage Heads, welcome back to the 6th Gear Garage. Long before iPhones existed and YouTube was just getting started, I repaired the rusty rear quarter panels and rocker panels on my 92 Honda Civic. Today, we're going back in time and I'll show you the whole process from start to finish. Honda Civics are known for rusting out. Road salt and moisture seep into spot welds, especially around the rear wheel opening. And once that rust starts, it spreads like cancer on these cars. Because I did this repair back in 2006, there were only photos taken because video resolution back then was the quality of a potato. So yes, it's a slideshow, but very well documented, so I hope you enjoy. Back in the year 2000, I bought this 92 Honda Civic hatchback with 100,000 miles. It had only one tiny bubble in the paint on the rear passenger wheel opening. By fall of 2005, at 177,000 miles, the body wasn't so pretty. The car was driven year-round, including in northern Ohio winters. I loved this car, so I decided to give body work a try. I had many of the tools, or was able to borrow them. I bought a brand new Lincoln 110-volt MIG welder and accessories, which would pay for itself on this job. I paid $430 shipped brand new from eBay. A compressor and air tools made life easier too. A cutoff tool, angle die grinder were used. I also used an electric 4.5-inch grinder and drill, both of which are needed. The drill is used to drill out the spot welds, so have some sharp bits. Have a couple wire wheel attachments for the drill to remove the factory body sealer. Other tools were vice grips, C-clamps, quick grip clamps, and some special clamps to hold on the panel for welding, although I found it easier just to hold the panel by hand and tack it on. So let's get started. First, remove the rear bumper, the taillights, the tailgate/trunk, the side skirts, and the plastic side molding if your Civic has it. Pull out the interior plastic panels. Using the new rear quarter panel, hold it to the car and use it as a template to trace. I've drawn the cut line with a Sharpie marker and cut another 1/8 inch outside that line using the air cutoff wheel. Remember, it is better not to cut too much out than to go over and remove too much metal. It's always easier to remove metal than to add it back in. Using a drill with the wire wheel on the end, I brushed the seams of the panel, removing the factory seam sealer. After removing all the sealer, you can see the spot welds holding the panel to the body. Each spot weld must be drilled out, unless you're lucky enough to have a spot weld remover. The drilling takes a while, so I kept a cup of oil near so I can frequently dip the tip of the bit in the oil to keep it cool. After drilling them all out, you can pull the body panel from the body. This picture was taken looking down into the fender well from the top where the cut was made. That little black strip, that's the seal that Honda put between the quarter panel and the inner fender. And I guess that wasn't enough. There are more spot welds to drill on the fender lip. If your rust was bad like mine, some of them will be rusted through. After you drill these, there are a few more on the bottom holding the panel to the rocker, and then you can pull the entire old quarter panel off. And here's a glimpse of what the interior will look like. I'd remove the rear seats, the trunk carpet, and the plastic. And you'll need access to the panels from the inside, and when you start welding, it'll help avoid any accidents with hot metal and catching things on fire. Here is my rocker panel. When I removed the plastic side skirt, I saw there was rust showing through. I poked it with a screwdriver, and it went right through. Now back in 2006, nobody was producing replacement rocker panels for the 92 and 95 Civic, so I made some. Using some sheet metal, I measured the dimensions and drew up some rocker panels. You can also make some out of thin cardboard first and use that as a template for the final metal ones. To bend the sheet metal, I clamped it in a bench vise with a thicker strip of steel on the front side to act as a straight edge. And then I clamped the sheet metal to the straight edge all the way across. Next, I hammered it evenly across with a mallet until it was just about at a right angle. Then flipped the rocker panel piece around and repeated the process for the other bend. Not bad for my first time doing it with basic tools. The rotted area was pretty long. My pieces of sheet metal weren't large enough to make a new piece in one sheet. I made another piece to go towards the front of the hole. But first, I coated the inside with rust inhibitor. Then I cut an angle on the pieces where they taper in, tack welded them both in, and made sure everything fit. When welding body pieces like this, it is best to tack in a few places, then go back and tack in between the first tacks, and then tack in between those tacks. A nice clean bead looks good, but it will get too hot welding in a straight bead and the sheet metal will likely warp or even burn through. Then I ground it down smooth and filled in any spots I noticed that I missed. Then I repeated the process again and again. Although it doesn't look pretty here, nobody will ever know. I cut out the rotted areas of the inner fender and welded in new sheet metal. Then I sealed it inside and out. After the rocker panels are completed, it's time to weld in the quarter panel. The first task is getting the fit just right. It's not easy, and trimming is a subtractive process, so take your time. Keep the taillight around when you're test fitting your quarter panel to be sure it's centered when installed. Before you weld, grind the paint off the inside and outside edges of both pieces of metal, and that'll produce a cleaner weld free of contaminants. You can see near the bottom of the body, I trimmed off too much and had to tack back in a gap that was about 1/4 inch at the bottom. Now just tack it in a couple spots and keep checking to make sure it didn't move. If everything is good, then begin tacking in between those tacks and so on, just like before. Keep filling in more tacks again and again. Also note that you see there's no hole drilled where the rear bumper attaches to the quarter. You'll need to do this after the quarters are welded in. Fitting the bumper will come last since it's more flexible and can adapt. After being ground smooth, the next task was to weld the bottom of the panel to the inner fender well. Originally, these were spot welded from the factory, but I'm just going to tack weld the seam and seal it from the inside and out. Now, welding on the passenger side is complete. Next, I started on the driver's side. Here's the rocker panel after I poked through all the rusted areas. Now, the driver's side panel has to be cut to go around the gas door opening. My driver's side rust didn't go up too high, so I didn't even need all the new panel. The inner wheel well wasn't rotted like the passenger side was, but there was a different problem. First, I cut away all the existing rust with the angle die grinder. Then I used a piece of cardboard to make a template for a patch. Then traced the shape onto a piece of sheet metal. Here it is, welded in and sealed. Now I'm drilling out the spot welds on the driver's side rocker panel. Note the marks I put above the square side skirt mounting holes so that I know where to drill the holes on the new panel. After cutting out the old rusty piece, more rust inhibitor was applied to the inside. The driver's side is all welded in and ground smooth. Now I've done the majority of the work. Then I sealed everything up inside and out. I was also sure to apply a body sealer between the inner and outer lip of the wheel well. Here's the inside of the rear panel after installation. I used a wire wheel brush on the inside to clean the welded area and then coat it with more undercoating. Now before you start getting the body ready to paint, there's one more thing you should consider: rolling the rear fenders. If you're lowered and running a wider tire than factory, then you should do this. There's normally a risk that you'll crack the paint, but now is a time you don't have to worry about any of that. Find a bat or a pole that isn't too big. Lift the corner of the car up a little so the wheel is touching the ground. Insert the bat, then slowly lower the car. Now, just turn the bat between your fender and the tire and roll it along. Go slow and take your time. I went over it twice and gained about an extra inch of clearance. Now for the installation of the side skirts. First, I had to measure where the holes would be. Now during all the rocker panel work, I ended up removing the black marks I made above the holes. This wasn't too hard to figure out though. I installed all the white plastic clips onto the back of the side skirt. The original holes toward the front are still there. So, putting the clips on the front of the side skirt partway into their holes, it'll pretty much line up where the new holes need to be put towards the back. I did a vertical measurement first to make sure the holes weren't too high or too low. Now, I just had to be accurate from left to right. So, I put a small dab of grease on the tip of the white clips and lined up the side skirt. And now, where the grease mark was left is where the hole needs to be drilled. Next, you'll need to file the small round hole into a bigger square hole. It's important to keep test fitting the side skirt with the white clips installed. Each time you test fit, you'll be able to see which side of the square hole needs to be filed more. If your side skirt looks to be too low, then file the top of the hole away. If the clip is not going in because the holes don't go to the right enough, file that side. Be careful not to file too much though, or the clips will be too loose. You'll know they fit when the skirt pops on with an easy punch. To get the side skirt and clips off after installing, slide the whole skirt forward from the back wheel to the front wheel. The skirt will release from the clips. Then you can turn each white clip 45 degrees and wiggle it out of the hole. Here it is, cleaned and painted with some self-etching primer. When you are welding, be very careful not to get the metal too hot or it will warp. The metal on these cars is so thin that it can happen very easily. Both sides of my car were warped inward after I was done welding, and I kept checking them in the beginning and they were okay. So it must have happened towards the very end when I was going back over and tacking in between my other tacks and getting the whole line filled in. So I had to use some filler on the warped area to fill the recessed part. It was very time consuming to sculpt it back to the shape of the car, but after much sanding, it's complete. This was the first time using body filler, and it was kind of hard to get everything perfectly smooth and not wavy. Basically, you'll start with a long board or a long sanding block. Start big and then work your way down to the minor imperfections. From there, you'll prep the body to get ready for paint. Now, I was able to drive another vehicle during the time I was working on this one. This is not a weekend project by any means. My Civic was extra rusty. Having to fabricate the lower rocker panels made this longer than expected. Okay, here's some pictures of the final product. Cutting and welding in new metal is the only sure way to stop rust. When deciding if you should attempt to do this yourself, remember, time is money. I ended up selling this car 11 years after completing this repair, and no rust had returned on the rear quarters or rockers. So, how did the rear quarters and rockers look on your Honda Civic? Somehow, my winter beater 1996 Civic HX had no rust after 15 years, not even a single bubble on the rear quarter panels. Do some of yours rust more than others? This repair is a featured DIY tutorial from the CivicEG.com forums. I'll post a link to the original thread in the description. You can join and comment on the forum or below in the YouTube comments. I read them all. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing for more how-to videos and vehicle updates here at the 6th Gear Garage.